in our preparation periods, it would not be uncommon to do 700 reps in a day, counting 60% and above, training 9 times a week.
That's super high frequency.
To get the most out of it, you probably want to break it into 2 sessions. The most important training day is the next day. I feel that the diet and the movement are the key to longevity.
If you have better health habits while you're doing a sport, when you leave the sport, you'll have better health habits. What are some things that Russian lifters were doing back in the day? What are some things that you think are true that they may have been doing to be so advanced?
When you have 100% control over your people, you could do amazing things in sport. Fat is fat, you know?
You guys are fatties, yeah. My God.
Yeah, you were 310 pounds?
Yeah, in that picture, yeah.
And you met Macho Man Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan on the same day?
Same day.
That Gold's Gym was pretty nuts. There's a lot of famous people in there.
None more famous in my eyes than those two. That was
iconic.
One of the highlights of my career was meeting those 2 guys. I mean, they're like comic book characters, right? Mm-hmm. How often do you get to meet a real comic book character?
It's wild. Yeah, it's a wild, wild place to be. What was it like? You know, I used to be 330 pounds myself. What was it like for you lugging around the extra weight? Was it beneficial or fun in any way, or did it just totally suck?
If I could make a list of 500 words, fun wouldn't have made that list of what it's like to be that kind of weight. You know, it's funny. Like I would break furniture as as my thing. You know.
Wait. When you were this age or a kid?
No, when I was that weight, like there wasn't furniture. The world isn't built for somebody that big and strong. It's just not. Like you grab handles sometimes and you pull a handle and you break the handle off.
So not on purpose. I thought you were over here like
no,
breaking
I'm not,
furniture.
I wasn't a dick about it. I'm just saying. You know, like you go out to eat like an outdoor, like in California, you have like the outdoor like seating.
Yeah.
And they have those plastic.
Oh, those things are done.
Chairs.
Yeah.
So like, you get
toast.
in. And you can't move the table, right? So you got to move. So you try to scoop it and you break the back legs. You go back, you go ass over tea kettle. And, you kick the table up in the air. I can't tell you how many times that fucking happened.
And you're used to falling from being an Olympic lifter.
Right.
Yeah, you fall on your butt, you got to kind of roll away, right?
Oh my God. Yeah, no, it's a miserable, all you do is eat and train and suffer. Like it's terrible.
This is the thing, though. You know, some people are actually very curious on how do you get that big, and everyone's always like, "Okay, drugs." But I mean,
no, I didn't. I couldn't take drugs back then.
So how did you get to 310? Because you were not that dude.
It takes a commitment. Eating is like training, right? You have to show up every day.
Yeah,
you have to plan it. You gotta. I mean, it's part of the thing.
How many meals did you eat a day, you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I didn't eat any less than 5,000 or 6,000 calories. Most of the time it was more, but I got to the point where I couldn't put any more weight on. I was asleep with a sandwich on my night table, and I would always wake up at night sweating because I get like night sweats. So, I would get up, I would go into the bathroom, I would change my shirt, like wash off, go back, eat my sandwich, and then go back to bed.
What kind of sandwich are we talking here?
So, yeah, I had ham and mayonnaise, white bread, or tuna. So great, keeping tuna out all night is a fucking smart idea. But like at that
point, make you more resilient.
You don't care. But yeah, that was like, I mean, probably not every night, but I would say, 3-4 nights a week.
It's a little premature, but I think that's the greatest quote in the history of the Power Project is that you had a sandwich next to your bed at night.
You got to do what you got to do.
We'll have to rank it with some of the other quotes, but
yeah.
I think that one definitely takes the cake for the year.
I think so. I honestly think so.
Yeah, good way to finish the year. All right,
you got to stay in positive, positive nitrogen balance, right?
When you don't really hear anybody talk about that anymore. When you were lifting, did it have some good? Was it helpful performance wise to weigh 300, 290? Was there a sweet spot?
Yeah, it's interesting because in retrospect, I think it was a mistake to go up. I was started as a heavyweight. Then they changed the weight classes. They lowered they went from 110 kilos, 242, to 108, which was 236. then to 105, 232. And in retrospect, I was never a super in shape as a heavyweight. Like I had some room to lose some body fat, and I just didn't have the discipline to do that. So after discussing with my coach, he's like, why don't you just go up? So it was, I did go up, but in retrospect, I wound up lifting almost as much as a heavyweight, weighing 235 as I did weighing 305.
I see.
So now part of it was because I went from heavyweight to super heavyweight, then went back down. So when I came back down, my numbers were about the same. So I don't know if I think that just I was more efficient, probably technically. I learned a lot, but I think I would have been able to lift the same if I stayed.
An Olympic lifter gets a tremendous amount of work done in a relatively short period of time. It seems like if you watch any of those old training hall videos where the coaches are in the background, they're not really paying any attention to their lifters that are on the platform. But you'll see a guy do like a front squat, he'll do a back squat, he'll do some cleans. And it's just this one guy on the platform just changing weights in and out.
Yeah.
Very efficiently, probably getting through, I don't know, maybe like so what seems like 12 working sets of work in a very condensed period of time. So you have to be, it's helpful to be in shape.
100%. I mean, like anything else, the better shape you are, the better you recover. I mean, it's about recovery and work capacity. It's, we would do in our preparation periods, it would not be uncommon to do 700 reps in a day, counting 60% and above. Now, that's not including bodybuilding, like where it isn't assigned a percentage, but, snatches, clean and jerks, squats, pulls.
You mean you would do bodybuilding kind of on top of everything, just accessory work?
Accessory work, and not including accessory work, but upwards, not all the time, but in the heaviest periods of preparation, upwards of 700 reps, training 9 times a week.
Training 9 times a week.
Yeah.
So then that's something interesting for, I think a lot of people that listen are powerlifters. That's super high frequency. So why such high frequency and why having certain days be double days?
So at a certain rep amount per session, it because of energy reserve and testosterone levels, it behooves you to break it up into doubles. So the sweet spot is right around 130 reps, give or take. I mean, it's not a hard number. But after that, to get the most out of it, you probably want to break it into 2 sessions. So that's the rationale behind breaking it up. You don't always do it, but if you can, and you don't have to. I don't train my guys with that kind of volume. I just don't. I think at some point it's diminishing returns. I'd rather have my guys fresher, moving better on a daily basis. Like one of my philosophies is the most important training day is the next day, right? So like I don't want to do anything in any particular day to screw up the next day. Now it doesn't mean you don't push and you're not sore and you're not, but like if they come in, especially with weightlifting, the precision and the speed of the movement, even in strength and conditioning, like I don't need my guys hobbling around, beating them up so bad in the weight room that they can't perform on the field because at the end of the day they got to run. Oh, that's after my career. Yeah, I'm in my.
I want to mention something
40s.
briefly. First of all, great usage of the word behooves. We have to give that some props. But secondly, some people might be like, "Oh, it's kind of foolish to go after like weighing so much. It's so unhealthy and this and that." But we've got to keep in mind like who your idols are, and who some of the people are that came before you in the sport of Olympic lifting. And sort of what a lot of those guys looked like. And for me with powerlifting, same thing. Back,
who are your guys?
15, 20 years ago, there was just like all those West Side Barbell guys were massive. Everyone was 300 pounds pretty much. And I'm a huge Ed Cohn fan as well. And Ed Cohn, he's always stayed in shape. And I think the heaviest he competed was like 242.
Yeah.
But, he was a little like block of granite and stuff. And so something I observed when I went to the WPO finals, just as a fan, and went to check it out. I saw Chuck Vogapool and all these great people. Goggins did the first 1,100 pound squat, 1102 squat, weighing like 260 or whatever. But what I noticed from most of the athletes was that they were just a lot bigger than me. There's also like just the fact that I just didn't come into my own yet in terms of my strength. I was still not anywhere near the strength that those guys were that were on the platform. But I was just kind of looking at it and I'm like, I owe it to myself to see what happens if I kind of start to weigh as much as some of these guys. Because at that time, I probably weighed 220 or 230. I was like, I wonder what things would be like if I was 250 or 260. And then it just, kind of morphed into that. But you were probably looking at, people like Alexiev. You see that old school singlet and he's got that giant belly. And these were people that we loved when we were kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you have a visual of what it should be, right, in your mind. But I think what people get twisted is health and performance are not the same, right? Like what we did is not because we wanted to be healthy. We wanted to lift as much weight as we could. And you do whatever you got to do to make that happen. And a lot of times, it doesn't mean that you ignore health, which I probably did more than I should have.
Maybe put it aside here and there.
But
for a second.
Your decision-making matrix isn't about, okay, is this going to be right?
Unbelievable.
Is this going to be healthy for me? It's that's not the first question you ask. Is this going to make me lift more weight?
This discussion is always like super interesting to me, and it makes me kind of wonder. I know these are different sports, right? But you see someone like a LeBron, and everyone's like, "Oh, there's only one LeBron. LeBron has great genetics." Blah blah blah. He's like 40 something. He's been in the league for so long.
Yeah.
He's putting up. I think he recently had his 4th triple-double game in a row, which he's never done in his career.
Jeez.
He's never done that in his career. So he's done 4 triple-double games in a row, and you see that. You see how he takes care of himself. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, can't we marry health and performance? Like, if we have, like, if we're an athlete and we're like, we want to keep doing this when we're 40, potentially, right? Is there a way we can train that won't take us out of the game too soon?
It's funny you say that. And my thinking now, when I work with my athletes, that is a big part of what I talk to them about, and how. The easy way to do that for me is through diet, right? So, like, if your diet is buttoned up, if it's, a low inflammatory diet, and, obviously the sleep and the other stuff, assuming all that stuff is, to me, the thing that I look back on, and again, I don't have a ton of regrets, but I would have paid more attention to the quality of what I was putting in my body. Now, at some point, I don't know, Mark, if you experience this too, but at some point, you need the calories, right? Like you can't just eat fucking broccoli and chicken breast. Like you can't get enough. So you have to do but there's other ways of doing it. Like ghee is a lot better option than
no ghee.
Right. No, right.
I see what you did there.
But there's good options that are high caloric,
grass-fed,
dense. Well, back then, I didn't have a pot to piss in, so I was taking, whatever I could. Right? Yeah. But how do you marry health and performance? I think a lot of it has to do with diet. I think that being mindful of diet and sleep and recovery, walking. I think cardio. Like I didn't do cardio for me was, run into the bathroom and take a dump. So walking at the very least,
me after,
it's things that aren't going to negatively affect your output, but are going to greatly affect in a positive way your overall health.
And nowadays you're a coach. You wrote this book, Suffer Smarter. I can't wait to dive into some of that. But being a coach and hoping that your athlete does A through Z.
Yeah.
We know that they're not. You and I didn't do it.
No.
I'm sure you experienced that. We might fall in love with A through E, and then that's our wheelhouse, and we stay there.
Yeah.
But Maybe for some athletes, they're doing other things on the side that are dumb. Maybe they're smoking too much weed,
Right.
drinking too much alcohol. I think, having some ice cream or burrito or something like that here and there and being like slightly off plan on the diet is one thing, but then also maybe not taking particular things that you're supposed to do, whether it be stretching or plyos or in particular, whatever the coach says. The coach might say, hey, finish up every workout with 30 minutes of forward and backward sled dragging.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be you and the guys kind of laughing, being like, no, I'm not doing that. Because you kind of you start to fall into the things that you really enjoy and the things that you're good at. And some of the things that you don't want to do, you tend to like push off. Did you do some of that? And then when you have athletes that aren't, following through on all this stuff, how do you get them to sort of, I guess, have a bigger buy-in?
Yeah. So as an athlete, I was I was dialed in with my training. Like when I was training, I was dialed in and I did a great job with that. I also did a really good job with certain recovery modalities. Like I was really chiropractor, massage twice a week. I swam. I wouldn't call it swimming. I would call it just getting into the pool, just to kind of unload my joints. I did sauna. So I did a lot of those things. Again, where I failed was in this nutrition. I drank a lot. My hours, I was a bouncer. So, just those hours are terrible. A lot of alcohol. And I didn't do a great job with that. So fast forward, the lessons that I learned, with my weightlifting athletes, I select a certain personality type. So I don't have to deal with the bullshit that I put my coach through. If they got to be like, I'm not going to hold their hand outside of the gym. You got to take care of your shit, or you got to find someone else to coach you. Like, I'm just not going to deal with it. The high school kids is a whole other, that's like juggling cats. So, I just gave him a nutrition presentation. It was fun. I use I looked at what Jim Wendler wrote about how his nutrition talk to his high school guys. And I just gave that. It's real simple. Two fists protein, 3 palms of carbs. Just you couldn't get any simpler. And you feel like you're talking to a monkey. I love my kids, and I'll do anything for them. And if you get 2 or 3 to help, you help 2 or 3 out, great. But I don't like when I was 16. I actually was on top of my diet. I learned how to cook. One of my first presents I remember for Hanukkah, my parents gave me was a Betty Crocker cookbook for kids. It had a picture. I'll never forget it. Great. Wow. It was a yellow book. It had a picture of a meatloaf football. It was a half a football and it had pimento laces. And I'll never forget it. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And they got me that book, and I learned how it was one of the greatest gifts they ever gave me because it got me interested in cooking. So, we ate pretty well as a kid. We ate normal, sat at the table, ate
Your
meat.
parents thought that was important for you for athletics, perhaps? Is that kind of what they got the idea?
I don't know. I started training when I was 13. My dad.
Or was it your mom's way of saying, hey, I ain't cooking for you anymore. You're eating too much.
My dad was the big cook.
Okay.
My mom, not so much. But I probably was, it's a good question. I'm going to ask my parents, what the fuck did you get me that book?
It seems super supportive of my son's he's into lifting and he's going to need to eat more. I would kind of wonder what.
But I was younger than before I wasn't lifting at the time.
Okay.
So I don't know. I'm going to ask my parents that when I get on.
They just didn't want to cook for you.
It's a great thing for kids to learn is to cook. It's huge.
I told my kids, I'm like, look, I'm going to give them some general basic recipes. And I said, look, I will help you learn because this is something that you need to do. But so with the high school kids, I give them, we have standards. Here are the standards. You either meet them, you don't. And if you don't meet them, there's consequences as far as the training goes. As far as the outside stuff, I give them guidelines. Follow these guidelines. And I can't harp on it. They either do it or they don't. And if they want help, I will never tell them no. It's hard. So when I went back to high school strength and conditioning, I had come from professional athletes, Olympic athletes, and where like you just show up and you plan, you organize the training, you guide them through. Like you don't have to do a lot. It's a lot. It's a giant job, but you're not putting out fires.
Yeah.
So when I go back to the high school, I'm like, all I'm doing is putting out fires. The training is it's very important, but it's not complicated. Like it's not complicated. What's complicated is building culture and keeping them on the rails. And I just wasn't equipped for that. When I went back in, I was like, I haven't done this kind of work.
Yeah.
So I'm learning, I'm getting better. I'll get there. But it's different work.
I want to ask both of you guys this real quick. And it pertains to diet. And it's an interesting thing you mentioned in terms of an athlete being able to have longevity, paying attention to your diet. Because, we've had multiple conversations where there's some really good coaches out there who mention how, a great athlete's diet isn't really a big deal, because they'll talk about like, I've heard John Danaher, who coaches he's worked with George St. Pierre and coached some of the best grapplers in the world. He's mentioned that he's never seen a diet make a difference between an athlete being great. You'll see, and I mean, obviously, when you look at certain sports like sprinting and basketball, some of these athletes just need a lot of calories. So they do eat some shit in their diet, right?
Some
to
of them
get
eat
those
Skittles and that's it.
Right.
It's crazy.
But the thing is, you mentioning that, what can both of you tell me about that in terms of diet actually being good for longevity? Because I believe it and I know it. But when other great coaches are saying that it's not a huge deal, why would somebody want to listen?
You want to take that first?
I agree with some of what's been said out there, from Danaher and from some other people. It does seem like the nutrition maybe doesn't matter as much for each individual. Like maybe it would matter more if someone's like really out of shape and they need to get in shape for football camp or whatever it might be. Because then you're talking about like a mathematical equation of like their body weight. But I think if someone is the correct body weight and they're conditioned well, I don't really know how much more there is to talk about. Because in terms of, I think that we love this idea of like ketones or creatine or carbs are going to like really fuel this like basketball intensive practice that I'm going to do. And they certainly can, and they certainly will, but I'm not sure if it matters what type of carbohydrate it is. Maybe it matters more so in the long run. When you got someone like LeBron who's playing for so long, maybe that's where it starts to make more sense. But I think these guys that are 20, 25, and still even under 30 years old, I think they're just able to get away with stuff for the interim. So you mentioned, we talk a lot about LeBron James. It'd be interesting to see 20 years from now how LeBron James is feeling. Like he'd probably be still feeling really good because it seems like he played his cards really well. But I think maybe to some of your point is like these high level sports are fucking dangerous.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily healthy almost no matter how you try to negotiate them. Like there's definitely a way you can ride the line of it being healthier, but professional football being healthy, it's like it's just not a possibility.
No, I agree with everything you said. One of my friends, multiple time Olympian, Wes Barnett, he works for Thorne now. He's one of their guys.
Oh, okay.
And we had a conversation once, and he said, before you're 40, your body takes care of you. After you're 40, you have to take care of your body. And say
that again, please.
Yeah. So this is Wes Barnett. This is not my quote.
Okay.
Wes said, before you're 40, your body takes care of you. After 40, you have to take care of your body. Ooh. And I think that as far as diet goes, I really think you hit it on the head. I think diet really matters when you're unhealthy because of the food choices you make. It matters less when you're healthy. So like once you become healthy and you have absent like some kind of disease that you have that food can help with. But if you're normal and you have a normal diet and your blood work is good, diet isn't going to give you standard deviations of improvement in health. If you're, eating Cheetos all day and you fix your diet, you'll have standard deviations of improvement. So I think that once you're there, there's not a lot of nutritional interventions that are going to move the needle any more than it's already being moved. Now, as far as longevity goes, like for me, and partially I have to thank you guys, with your journey, paying attention to how I eat, especially for what's really I feel has been most beneficial to me in moving the needle. My body fat's is low now as it's been since I'm in college.
Wow.
And a lot of that has to do with not carnivore diet, like strict, but it's meat, it's eggs, it's milk, it's fruit. It's I use oatmeal on occasion because of my my cholesterol. It's sourdough bread. I got
Andrew's with you on the sourdough bread.
Well, I got that from the Vertical Diet.
Yeah.
He talks about sourdough bread. I fucking love bread. So this gives me like a little bit of it keeps me from shaking, right? I get a little bit of bread. But
Do you have some at the bedside too?
No.
Okay.
And I eat less.
Those days are over.
Okay.
Those days are over. And I eat less. I don't think people need as much protein as they say if the protein sources are good. So I'm just eating less. And from a longevity perspective, like I don't take any anti-inflammatories. Like I don't take any drugs. I have some supplementation that I take every day, vitamin D and things like that. But I feel great. Now I'm moving more, but I really think the diet, because it was so bad, like when I had my gym in California, it was so bad that changing it really, I feel it. And as we get, I'm 55, so, and I got fucking miles. And I feel that the diet and the movement are the key to longevity. And any movement. Like if you're not moving at all, put your shoes on, walk outside, and come back. Do that for 30 days. That's all you do. Just do that, and then form the habit, like that mindfulness of cleaving out a small part of your day to move and eat is a game changer for longevity, I think.
I think, better is always going to be better, so it always have a better outcome. If you have better health habits while you're doing a sport, when you leave the sport, you'll have better health habits. That's one of the biggest problems that we see is that athletes leave the sport and then they really start to gain a lot of weight. And sometimes they don't even really gain that much. They just get like puffy. They just get like kind of bloated. They're an extra 20 pounds heavier than they were. And they just don't look the same. No. At the same time, I do think there's people where everything kind of matters a little bit less. Like with Bo Jackson, like no one had to probably ever show him how to jump. I'm just assuming. Maybe they did. Maybe someone showed him a little bit about long jump or something. But I know that he went into a competition. I mean, these are kind of fairy tales at this point, but who knows? Supposedly he went into a decathlon with no experience on how to use a pole vault because his school didn't have one, and he beat everybody. And then he won the state championship, and he actually did a pretty proficient pole vault. So some things are going to just matter less to people. Just the same thing in school. Sometimes people are like, I didn't even study, and they smoke right through the test.
Hate those kids.
Where somebody else has to really work hard just to get a 70 or something on the test. So I don't think that food, though, again, I think that we want to think that something magical is going to happen when you put the right food in, when you do something like an 800 meter, that it's really going to matter. It's really going to matter a ton when we do this MMA fight. It's like, who really promotes that? And it's like people that coach people for MMA. So they got,
right.
They kind of have to believe in that. I like to believe in it personally, but I also know that it's not true. Like I've seen it not be true too many times.
And I don't mean this in a bad way, you're over the fucking top when it comes to nutrition, at least what you show to the world. Like, I don't know what you do behind closed doors, but Why? Why is to that extreme?
I love it.
Is it a control thing? Like, do you feel like
Yeah.
that's something you could control?
I love a lot of the discipline of
Okay.
it. And also I was out of control, for many years, gaining all that weight. And that was a very difficult thing to kind of like unwind.
Okay.
I was like, oh, I'm just getting bigger for this. And it was like a thing until it became like out of control to where it was, very difficult to go back against the grain. At first it was like, I weighed 230, 240. I weighed 240 from the time I was 16. So being 240 wasn't like crazy. Then 270 and 290 and stuff like that. And that felt good. And I was lifting very heavy. But I got used to the taste of some of these, highly processed foods. And I was hooked and I was pretty much stuck. And then, after most competitions, because of people like Ed Cohn, I would take care of myself. I would drop weight. I would try to drop a lot of that like bloat and all the other bullshit. 'Cause I'm like, I'm not competing for a little while. There's no reason for me to walk around dangerously, this heavy and fat and everything else. And so I'd lose some weight. But then the mission to like really start to drop weight just became more and more apparent, when I left the sport of powerlifting.
And was it because did you not feel good, or you just, like I said, you felt like you were out of control and needed something to control? Like, what was how do you go for 180 degrees?
I've always loved this stuff. I've been lifting since I was a kid, and my first time I ever tried a ketogenic diet, it was like 1995.
Oh, no way!
I was like in high school still.
Who turned you on to that?
1994.
Was it like
my brother, because my brother went and lifted with Ron Fedko. I don't know if you ever run into Ron Fedko. Ron Fedko, a PhD in applied physics or some shit like that. Super smart.
Yeah.
He actually went on to win an Academy Award because he figured out like he figured out how to, like, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Digitally special effect water.
Oh, wow.
In movies. Like he did it for Jurassic Park and shit.
Okay.
It was fucking wild. That's how smart the guy was. But the guy was a power lifter, and he taught us a lot of things about powerlifting, but also taught us about nutrition. And he told my brother, he's like, you're too fat. You need to drop weight because you're pretty strong, but you're not really strong enough to be 242. You should go down to 220 class. It'd be perfect for your height and everything. And so my brother went on pretty much a no carb diet. He said, just eat meat and water. And if you don't feel good, eat an apple or some olives here and there. And that will help your blood sugar out.
Well, so you guys have been at this for a long time.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, we've been messing with it for a long time. I always just liked it. I always just kind of, once I started getting into lifting and drinking the protein shakes, the Metrex drinks and all that shit back in the day, I just became like super fascinated by it.
Yeah, I like it. I have to be honest. I miss pasta. I'll eat it every so often. Like I can't. I don't want. Not that I can't. I can do anything I want to do, but I just don't want to be that strict. I'm like, to me, my blood work dictates my decision making. Like my blood work keeps on improving, and if I want a fucking hot dog, I'm gonna have a goddamn hot dog.
I want to really just add in here because like I'm still in a stage of athletics where I compete, but I've been fortunate enough to be around people like yourself around this podcast and get so much information to put things into practice, right? And the thing is like, there is a difference that I feel when eating shitty as an athlete versus eating well. But the thing is when I was eating shitty as an athlete, I still did okay. And when you're doing okay and you're eating kind of shitty, you're gonna be like, I'm good. And everyone around is going to be like, it doesn't matter. You're doing great, right? So you usually have no reason to try to clean anything up. It takes extra time. It's not as tasty. It doesn't bring you as much mouthfeel and pleasure. So why do it if you're already doing okay? But the thing is like, if an athlete were, and when I say eat clean, I'm not meaning eat chicken breast and rice and vegetables and fiber and don't get any calories in. I just mean mainly eat whole food. So there ain't nothing wrong with an athlete eating pasta. You're going to use that shit as energy, right? But if you mainly eat whole foods and you get some of the crap you might overeat out of your diet, I truly think that all athletes would probably notice how much better they feel, although they've never given themselves the chance to actually feel that. all really high level athletes have something that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Something in the fucking ankle, something in the back, something in the shoulder, but they're still high level athletes despite that. And they never really give themselves the shot. Because, you know, as an athlete, you're always focused on competing, training, all this other shit. Nutrition's just like, well, it's working, so why shift, right? So that's why, like, when people say that shit, that's not a big deal. It kind of just emboldens the athletes. Be like, yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm a fucking boss, right?
What I think is true here for sure is that if you kind of reverse engineer the whole thing and you think about recovery, you know, it's not really debatable that we need sleep. Exactly how much sleep, you know, who knows? I don't know. Some people say 8 hours, but I think everybody's a little bit different on how much sleep they need. So if you start to eat in a way that negatively impacts your sleep, you're already screwing yourself over. And then what about this? How many times have we heard this? I've heard this about almost every single athlete. Oh my God, that guy blasts caffeine all day. You know, that guy's got energy drinks. That guy's got this. That guy's got that. Oh my God, that guy smokes so much weed. That guy does this or that. And they're doing that for a particular reason. It's to mitigate something. Oh man, he's got tons of anxiety, so he needs to smoke weed to go to bed. Well, there's potential if he just cleaned up his diet and was on a good diet that potentially he'd have less anxiety. And
it's not going to make you worse. How about that?
Yeah, right. It's not going to inflame the problem any further. It's not going to make it worse. And so if you kind of think about it from that standpoint, and it might make only just a small little change over time, but that small little change over time is something that I think is really cool, and that's why I continue to like pursue it. And I know like it's easy to just have a confirmation bias and just be like, oh, this guy, and this guy, they just eat pasta before, you know, and they eat pasta and meatballs with cheese all over it before they fight, and they destroy everybody. And you're like, well, okay, but there's also a handful of guys that don't do that are, you know, trying to win as well. So you can't always just look at the main guy, because the main guy might not have really run into other complications from the way that he's eating. But at some point, he's going to.
You're trying to get healthier and you're probably eating chicken for every meal or the same beef cuts for every meal. And trust me, I know how good some cuts can be. You can make anything taste good. But Good Life Protein is the place that you want to go if you want to start adding some different types of meats into your rotation. They got picanha, they got chorizo sausage, which is still great on the macros because they're using Piedmontese beef. They have lobster. They have all different types of fish. They have actually a bunch of different types of chicken too. They have lamb. I'm telling you, if you give it Good Life a shot and try some of their different meats, which are still great on the macros, you'll start to appreciate the things that you can get from different meat. Don't think too hard about that one. But check out Good Life, because we're sure that you're going to love the taste and the quality, and it's good for your health. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, that's over at goodlifeproteins.com, and at checkout, enter promo code POWER to save 20% off your entire order. Or if you want to save even more, use promo code POWERPROJECT to save an additional 5% off your Build a Box. Again, goodlifeproteins.com. Link is in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
Yeah, you know, I think you bring up some good points. I think a couple of things. We know that people who are world-class in everything, including their physiology, right? So, so I think that is a truth. I think the other truth is that everything matters. To what degree, it depends. But you can't do nothing you do exists in a vacuum, especially around performance or athletics or even life. Right. So if just because your outcome is good, and I deal with this in strength and conditioning a lot, because again, in weightlifting, you know, you're coaching well if your athletes perform well. There's a number, right? You hit the number, you don't hit the number. It's very binary. Strength and conditioning is not so binary, because what we do in the weight room isn't the thing that they're doing. It's their performance on the field. I say that a strength coach doesn't have especially with talented athletes, doesn't have a huge impact on performance for the more talented an athlete is. So then you start looking at other metrics like soft tissue non-contact injuries, time lost to injury, things like that. They're a little bit more measurable, even then. So what it really boils down to, it's not outcome, it's process. So we know that certain process will lead to a particular outcome, right? So if you eat high processed food, regardless of your outcome, right, that process is fucked up. Yeah. And because everything matters, that is going to start to matter at a higher degree at some point, even if the outcome isn't affected just yet. So with strength and conditioning, it's the same thing. It's like, well, we know what the process. There's a process that is good. Then now there's leeway in that. That's what the focus has to be, because you don't have control over the outcome all the time. There's other factors that are involved in that outcome. But like diet, to me, even if you're feeling good, like we hear like these stories of, guys just eating candy. Like when I was working with the Clippers,
DK Metcalf.
Yeah. Like when I was working with the Clippers, I was part of the team that did their exercise testing back in the day when Lamar Odom was on the Clippers. All he would do was eat candy and smoke weed.
Well,
that was it.
Are we surprised?
Now he could have been probably one of the best basketball players that ever existed. I mean, a 6'10" guy that had all the skills. He didn't care about any of that stuff. Now, did it affect his mentality? Like he kind of went off the deep end a little bit towards the end. He got hurt. Like, did the diet and the weed and all the other stuff affect that? Maybe, maybe not. But if the process was better, I'm going to argue that the outcome would have been better, especially for, like, you got to imagine the damage you got to do to yourself to ruin that career. Like that guy, I mean, I was one of the most amazing athletes I've ever seen.
It's just find it unfortunate. The first off, he was amazing, but I type in Lamar Odom on Google. First thing that pops up.
The Kardashians?
Nah, Lamar Odom admits to purchasing Khloe Kardashian's sex doll. This is is new news.
It's such an unfortunate.
It's a downfall, bro.
Such an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, just eat a steak. You wouldn't buy that.
Now, if he ate better, does it mean that all that would have been different? I don't know. But, to me, it's
a code. It's a championship mindset. Like,
there's
that's
a mindset.
What I like about it.
There's a mentality that comes with doing, like some of my guys, like my high school guys, they're so talented. And what I preach to them is being on time, being prepared, do the job right. And, things that have nothing to do with playing football necessarily. But if you're on time, if you prioritize being on time, think about like what has to happen in order for you to be on time all the time. And understand that even if you do everything right and you're still late, sometimes you're late, right? Like it's just the way, there's a consequence, right? Even if you try to do the right thing and it doesn't, and it's like all these things it's a process. Like I try to teach them a process-oriented life, even if the outcome doesn't work out, right? Because the process is the only thing you can control. And, this is, I think with being like with eating, is it going to make you score 40 points? Maybe not. But the mindset, like what we talked about Kobe earlier on, right? Like talk about mindset and live in that code 24/7. Was he going to be one of the greatest players of all time anyway? Maybe. So I know Jordan's, the strength coach for the Bulls early on was Al Vermeil. And Mike Catone, who is the head of weightlifting, he's like the head coach of USA Weightlifting. So he was one of the assistant coaches on that team. And Al Vermeil was one of my idols. And I asked him early on, we had long talks about strength and conditioning. And he said to me, and I've used this since, what's the difference between training like Michael Jordan type athletes and everybody else? And he said, the strength and conditioning, won't increase, like didn't make Michael Jordan, or Kobe Bryant. It didn't like make them jump higher or move faster or do any of that stuff. So what it does is it slows down the decline over the course of a game, season, and career. That's what strength and conditioning does for the elite. And so it's not about, so if you think about that, it's not like, well, strength and conditioning equals more points. It just means you can do what you do longer.
That also does mean more points.
Which does, yes. But it's not measurable.
I got you.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not measurable.
Yeah.
So that stuck with me. And he said the opposite is true with less talented athletes. There's a direct correlation between the strength and conditioning and their ability to perform. So
they still need it.
You still need it.
Yeah.
But the outcome is going to be a little bit different. You know, you're going to experience the outcome a little bit differently.
We've pulled up a quote on this podcast from Barry Sanders. It was a few episodes ago, but Barry Sanders has been quoted saying that his strength conditioning routine, where he would be squatting 3, 4, 5, right, was the thing that allowed him to play in the NFL and be injury free. Because I think, Mark, you said he's only had like a rib injury.
Yeah, I think he mixed like half a game or a game, maybe his whole career.
He was on, like, I used to get this magazine, Bigger, Stronger, Faster. Not the title of your brother's movie.
The VHS tapes, yeah.
So it was a quarterly magazine, and they're actually a company in Salt Lake, and they would make equipment, but they had this training system that was great. It's my first training system. It kind of introduced me to periodization. But every quarter they would send out these magazines. And all mostly high school kids. I remember one of the magazines was Barry Sanders in high school. He was like squatting, and he was like one of their, Bigger, Stronger, Faster All-Americans or whatever.
Yeah.
So he was at it from the get-go. If you guys had I can't think of his name. Anyway, it'll come to me. But like Saquon Barkley.
Unbelievable.
I mean, 400-pound clean.
That recent highlight where he jumped over backwards.
Oh, yeah.
That's just
ridiculous.
Stupid.
That's
Beautiful.
insanity.
So, like, strength and conditioning didn't do that for him, right? He was touched. Yeah.
So yeah, this is Bigger, Faster, Stronger, the magazine.
That
This
got
is
me
sick.
into periodization. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I remember that magazine. It was amazing.
This is
It was the only, back then, it was one of the only magazines that you could see that wasn't
it
bodybuilding.
is.
Yeah, I wouldn't be where I am now without weights. They made me, Andrew, can you read the rest?
Oh man.
They made me feel fast and quick with a bigger body weight. Also, I've never been hurt.
There you
Barry
go.
Sanders.
That's like ridiculous.
So, like, my guys this year for football, we the season didn't end the way I wanted to end, but we had 0 non-contact soft tissue injuries. 0. It's like I credit the fact that they were training.
hardening their minds too, and how do we know, like, from doing your program, maybe that kid is just a half step in the right spot
Right.
at the right time, rather than being in the wrong spot at the right time, and just turning the head around just ever so slightly to see that someone's about to, smash into him just because of some
It could be
drills
a
he's
number
doing.
of different things, but the fact is that, that to me, that's the most important. I look at a program and I want to see those numbers. I don't give a fuck about the record board. Like, cause you can have, we have some freaks on my team that are 600-700 pound squatters without even having to do much. So that doesn't mean I'm a good coach. Right. But like little things like that are important. I think that's why we train, not to put up numbers on the record board, but like for those other things, to make sure that, if my kids are missing time, if your athletes are missing time due to these kind of injuries that are preventable, then that's on you. That's on the coach.
Something I think that's important to mention as we were talking about the diet and just having a more disciplined athlete. It really was a bodybuilding show that I did a couple years ago, probably 5 years ago now.
You were in
So
incredible shape. Holy shit.
that changed my mindset forever.
How?
When I did the contest, once I started getting into the diet, and I was maybe about 3 weeks in, and I wasn't even on any sort of real, I was on a strict plan, but it wasn't like some major calorie restriction or anything like that. But as I got a couple weeks into it, I was like, holy shit, man. When it came to powerlifting and doing every single thing that I was supposed to do, I was probably only about 70% in. And I thought I was 100.
Interesting.
Bodybuilding made me realize that because of all the extra shit that you have to do. I mean, depending on, for me, it was a little bit of a rushed preparation and stuff like that. So it was a little different for me than maybe somebody else's experience. But yeah, that changed my outlook on a lot of things because bodybuilding is 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
The diet, we were saying like, well, the process versus the actual game itself, it's kind of hard to tell. But the game itself in bodybuilding.
Andrew, could you rewind that a little bit real quick?
Nsima wants to see my ass again.
No. Rewind it. You gotta see that dumpy when he walks by.
Oh, yeah. Can't get rid of that squat butt no matter how much you diet down.
That's something else.
Dumpy.
That's something else.
Dump truck.
All right, keep it going.
That's great.
Well, what were the girls that were spraying you and all that stuff talking about the whole time?
Oh my God.
They were just asking, what do you do for your butt?
Yeah.
Squat 1,000 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was. Yeah, I went into that was a room where
it is quite an ass.
It just takes over the show.
I went into a room because I needed like some other type of stuff on me. I don't even know what, they were like, oh, you need this on you to like go on. I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
I go into this room and it's all women and they just go, oh my God. They're like, look at your ass. They're like, your ass is amazing. They were like, so I just turned like beet red. It's so funny because I've never had something like quite like that happen before. I was just like, oh my God.
Well, you're in
I was like, now I'm part of the Me Too movement.
Well, I mean, you're certainly in a crowd that appreciates a good ass. So,
Right, exactly.
And you get judged on it too.
Yep.
So how come, that was this is the pre-judge?
Well, I did different.
Okay.
Yeah, I did like, whatever the hell the board short thing is or whatever.
Physique.
Physique. There you go.
Oh man.
Switching gears here a little bit. What are some things? Because I always find this to be interesting. These things are kind of forever locked into like folklore, these like myths or whatever they might be. What are some things that Russian lifters were doing back in the day to, we saw the video of Alexiv earlier.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, what are some things that you think are true that they may have been doing to be so advanced in
Well,
Olympic
I mean,
lifting?
I know it's not but these are my friends. So, you got to understand something, like, especially the old Soviet Union, and China's a lot like that now. Like when you have 100% control over your people, you could do amazing things in sport. I always say, like, I always want to coach in a communist country because, I mean, I don't worry about shit. So with Russia, like they weren't, like people talk about drugs, they weren't doing anything more than anybody else was doing. You got to understand, like they had hundreds of thousands of weightlifters. So each town has its own weightlifting team. And then they had coached, all the coaches are trained under the same educational process. So there's different sports schools in Russia. And when you go to want to be a coach, you go, undergrad, and it's all math science. Then you take a test, which is the equivalent of our like GRE. And it's all math science. And that test is the same entrance gateway to either go to medical school or coaching school. So that's the level of science education that they have. So if you go into the coaching school, it's I think it's 2 years of general coaching, and then you specialize in your sport. Now everybody's reading off the same script, like the curriculum is the same. So now these coaches, they disperse all through that giant landmass. And so you have the town, you have regional coaches. So the best lifters in the town are then put up to the regional and then up the ladder. So by the time they're on the national team, so I think back in the day, there was, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of athletes the Russians would start with in the beginning of the quadrennium.
Try to stay a little bit closer to the microphone.
Beginning of the quadrennium.
What is the quadrennium?
4-year Olympic cycle.
Oh, wow. Cool.
There would be probably 50 that are national team.
Ooh.
So these are the coaching is great. Everything is just dialed in. So people think that there's some magic behind. And China's doing the same thing now. So, and it's the other thing culturally in places like Russia, old Soviet Union, Iran currently, all the Central Asian countries, China. As a man, women weightlifting too, but not in all those countries, being strong is important culturally. Mm. So historically, the strongest man in the world is the man who clean and jerks the most. In Iran, that's a big deal. So they have great supers because the supers is going to lift the most weight. Mm-hmm. So culturally, it's important as a man, strength, heavy athletics. That's why I like all those Central Asian countries, Dagestan, and those fighters are coming out. Mm. It's an expression of manliness to be able to be strong or to be able to fight. We don't have that here. It's not that we don't have good weightlifters, but our women are the best weightlifters, not our men. Our women our men are. It's not that they're not good. It's just competitive. They're not competitive relative. Not all of them. Some of them, like Hampton Morris and some of these guys. But relatively speaking, especially our bigger men.
Well, they're playing other sports.
Well, all our great big weightlifters are playing football. That's just the way it is. Mm.
The Russians also, my understanding is they just tested a lot of stuff, right? Didn't they kind of
Well, the Nazis started sports science, but the Russians took it to another level.
But they would study how much milk the guy had before a workout and how well that
everything.
would work.
It's incredible. I have all that, not all of it, but I have a ton of that. That Russian research.
We can't skip over this Nazi thing, but go ahead.
They would try milk before the workout, after the workout. They would test and see what was better.
The Nazis. So the Nazis, just like the Russians, the Nazis used sport as a way to show dominance.
Oh, yeah.
So this is with Russia after World War II, it was called 1948, right? 50% of the Russian men between 18 and 24 were dead on the battlefield. So they had to rebuild their country.
Wow.
And one of the ways that they wanted to instill pride back into Mother Russia was they decided that sport was going to be the vehicle. So we were killing the Russians in the 40s and 50s in weightlifting. Weightlifting was an important part of that rebuild. We want to be the biggest, strongest guys. So if you fast forward 18 years, or 48, 58, 1960, so it's just I think the Mexico games. All of a sudden now, the tide is starting to shift because they had 18 years of throwing a ton of money into sports science and developing this Olympic program. And then by 64, 68, 72, all of a sudden things started to change because now they had their first and second crop of kids born after the fall, after World War II.
Wow.
So those countries use sport as a way to show their dominance. The masculinity means something very different in these. Now I'm saying, talk about toxic masculinity and all that stuff. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but being big and strong is never toxic. It should be meaningful for men. To be big and strong. We've lost that a little bit here. Not in this room, thankfully, but outside of this room a little bit. But they haven't lost that in those other countries. Mm. So that's a little history.
If you're someone that's taking supplements or vitamins or anything to help move the needle in terms of your health, how do you know you really need them? And the reason why I'm asking you, how do you know, is because many people don't know their levels of their testosterone, their vitamin D, all these other labs like their thyroid, and they're taking these supplements to help them function at peak performance. But that's why we've partnered with Merrick Health for such a long time now, because you can get yourself different lab panels like the Power Project panel, which is a comprehensive set of labs to help you figure out what your different levels are. And when you do figure out what your levels are, you'll be able to work with a patient care coordinator that will give you suggestions as far as nutrition optimization, supplementation, or if you're someone who's a candidate and it's necessary, hormonal optimization to help move you in the right direction so you're not playing guesswork with your body. Also, if you've already gotten your lab work done, but you just want to get a checkup, we also have a checkup panel that's made so that you can check up and make sure that everything is moving in the right direction if you've already gotten comprehensive lab work done. This is something super important that I've done for myself. I've had my mom work with Merrick. We've all worked with Merrick just to make sure that we're all moving in the right direction and we're not playing guesswork with our body. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, that's over at merrickhealth.com/powerproject. And at checkout, enter promo code POWERPROJECT to save 10% off any one of these panels or any lab on the entire website. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
What do you got brewing over there, Andrew?
So I mean, kind of going back really quick about like the nutrition and the longevity thing. I always point to the one story I heard about Chris Webber. He would have 40 chicken nuggets before every meal from McDonald's.
Oh, that sounds great.
And it's like, oh, but like that was his thing. So like without that, would he be who he was? But then there's always the argument of like, well, what would he have been able to do without that? He had a lot of...
Maybe he wouldn't call a timeout when they had no more timeout.
Well, yeah, that was when he was younger. Oh, never got over
Michigan,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, to the very end of his career, people would still yell that out. But he had a lot of bad knee injuries that took him out of the game.
Right? There's the inflammation from those chicken nuggets that add to, like, yeah, I mean, process, right? Like, bad process.
Yeah. And then it's like, it is tough to, because like somebody will always weasel in an argument for or against whatever. But as far as like what Danaher was saying with like GSP stopped fighting very early, in my opinion, right? He still had many years left in the tank.
Why?
I'm not sure why I honestly don't know why.
But he took care of himself.
He did, yeah. But when Danaher's saying that like, oh, it doesn't matter because look at him, it's like, well, he did stop early. If maybe he prolonged his career a little bit longer or stayed in longer, maybe he would have had to address it.
Ooh, something on the GSP thing. Don't forget what you're about to say. Don't forget the other, right? GSP was on Lex Fridman's podcast talking about fasting. This was after his career. And he was like, I wish I fasted before fights because it makes me feel virile and hungrier. And I feel like I would have fought better. He said that's Lex Fridman posts all of that. So, okay, just want to say.
Yeah, no. So what I was going to get at is like, eventually it becomes the thing that you can't ignore. So, I used to be a really diehard Kings fan. So the other player that I always point to is Peja Stojakovic, who he had a great career on the Kings, but as he got older, it was like, oh yeah, I'm going to give it another shot, but this time I'm going to start paying attention to my diet. And when you hear that, you're like, wait, you're a pro athlete. How do you not pay attention to your diet? It's like, well, this thing happens. They play for several years, and then eventually they have to start addressing all the things that they were ignoring at one point. So it's of my opinion that sure, you can get by, but imagine how much better you could be. But also eventually you have no choice. You're going to have to eventually address that or improve that area of your overall performance because you can't ignore it forever.
But how are you going to get a 22-year-old multimillionaire who's doing their thing to say, hey, wait a second, what you're doing, you got to do it different. Like, motherfucker, did you see my Lamborghini? Like, why would I listen to you? And that's what you got to deal with. And that's
It's
hard.
tough, yeah.
It's a hard. I think about like I don't remember what it's like to be 22. But if I was that, like you wonder, like if I was that guy, would I listen? What's my motivation? You're gonna tell me in 10 years it's gonna matter? What the fuck? It's funny. I didn't think my friends didn't think that I was gonna live until 30. Damn. I won a $500 bet when I turned 30 because no one thought I was going to turn 30. So why the fuck would I think about that at 22?
That's why I think like these days are pretty cool because we see the effect on specific guys. Like I mentioned LeBron, and there are always people who are going to be like, oh, he's the best.
You can point to other people, Tom Brady as well. I mean, there's
Tom
Brady
is interesting because he really turned it around.
He's a really good example because, you know, Tom Brady ran a 5.040, I think, like recently. Like,
and he looked like he fell off the bar stool during the combine.
Right, exactly. And he had to actually, he paid attention to his diet, but I would imagine that going into the combine, he probably wasn't.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning Tom Brady.
Why?
One of you.
What's the joke?
Oh, I get it. I was like, why are you laughing so hard now?
I was mentioning LeBron, and Mar was like, you could mention Tom Brady. And
That's right.
You're totally right. So totally right. Exactly. We got guys that
are you Tom Brady
Tom
guy?
Brady.
Not really. Not necessarily, but he's white. So
Yeah.
He is.
But great white hope.
But that's the thing. I think like athletes, because I very much look up to LeBron James, even though I'm not a basketball player. And the main reason is because I know that I started my specific sport late. I started at 23 for jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah.
And I know that for me to get to the level that I want to be at and compete at, I have more years and I need to be able to last. And there's a guy who's been doing that at the highest level for 20 years. So it's like, you just need to take care of yourself. You need to do the things to take care of your body so that in your late 30s and 40s, you can reach the level that you're trying to get to. And most athletes that are competing want to do this shit till they're older. They obviously want to be great, but most athletes want to keep it up, but they just haven't seen people that have shown it's possible until kind of now. Whereas like Tom Brady's still doing great. LeBron's still doing great. The examples we've had in the past, like Jordan's always been great, but towards the end of his career, like he wasn't putting up the same numbers. He was still Jordan though. Like I think he had like a one game that was pretty crazy.
He had a 40-point game with the Wizards.
Yeah. But you typically see the downward trend. So you always have this belief that when I get there, it's going to be downward. You're not seeing that with LeBron and Brady.
Like the problem is youth, right? Like how do you convince somebody that at that age and look in the crystal ball and say, look, here's what's going to happen.
They got to convince themselves.
But how many people have that maturity? I didn't have that maturity at that age.
Yeah.
You know, like I can't imagine that I'm an outlier. You know, it's not everybody can be Dan Gable, right? Like not everybody can be that guy who gets it right from the start.
Jerry Rice comes to mind, you know, because he was impeccable with his preparation and his nutrition. Roger Craig as well. I mean, there's a lot of football players that, and
I mean, Romanowski is another one.
Romanowski,
you know, he was a little nuts, but but he's a guy that knew it was important.
A lot of professional athletes that, you know, not only have the talent, but they also take it to the next level with paying attention to everything. But
it's hard though.
I could see, especially nowadays. I mean, part of the reason why Nick Saban left college football was like, I can't really mentor anybody anymore. It's like these guys make a lot of money and it's just not the same.
No, it's definitely not the same. It's hard. The things that were important are not important anymore.
This is the last one I'm going to mention because it just hit me. Mijaín Lopez in the last Olympics, 42 years old, got his I think 5th gold for Cuba.
Yeah.
Another person who just literally got gold in one of the hardest sports on your body, right? At 42.
Damn.
Right? We know it can be done. And again, like, let's not throw up our hands and just say genetics. We do know that these athletes have great genetics, right? But the thing is what the fuck are they doing? They're doing something, which we can do. We can do.
I'm with you. You preach it to the choir. It's just how do you reach that those guys at an early age?
Yeah, I could see like where you could give examples of Jerry Rice and LeBron and
Peyton.
And all these great athletes that came before, but they could also be like, well, I'm never going to be them anyway. So what's the difference?
Look at David Wells.
Like, I'm really good, but maybe I'll never be that good, you know?
I mean, there's always going to be an example of the opposite,
right?
of the wrong thing. But that, like, to me, when I like with technique, with teaching weightlifting, like you can watch some of these people setting world records and they're doing some crazy shit. And I'm like, well, if you're going to learn the textbook technique, right? Learn what it's like. If you draw it up, learn that. And then, you know, as you develop, if you want to change some things, let's change things. But you got to start somewhere. Where's your base? The base is what we know, a known process that works. And then as you get to know yourself better and things change, then you can start making adjustments. But let's everybody start off the same script.
And some of these athletes are leaving the sport and, you know, I don't know what their problems are behind the scenes, but it's seemingly without a scratch on them, some of them. And I think maybe you could point to some of those guys and say, hey, this guy's a commentator. He now has had a, you know, Troy Aikman or someone like that has now had a job for the last 15 years in broadcasting. And maybe I don't even really know what his, you know, regimen was, but like maybe he played his cards right. And maybe for some of these young guys coming up, it's like, what about when you leave the game? Like that could be 3 years from now, or it could be 15 years from now. If you play your cards right, it could be 15 years from now. And on top of it, you could leave the sport without.
And you can make more money, right? If the money's your driver, you play longer, you make more money.
Right.
You know, it's just, I get you. I don't know. I'm working on the secret sauce to try to get young guys to understand the future.
I have a question real quick, because, you know, you were mentioning all this stuff in terms of getting young guys to fall in line, right? Do you work with so many young people, and this makes me really curious how you instill belief into them? Because for me, I was fortunate to have a parent, a mom, that like I have a tattoo on my hand that says limit and it has a line through it, because the one thing that she drilled into me is that you do not have a limit. People would always say the sky's the limit. She actually, like, when I was 6, I remember her telling me there is no limit. The sky's the limit is the stupidest saying ever.
Go right to the clouds.
Right? Yeah. So the thing is I've always had like a level of belief that I know people think it's ridiculous. How do you instill that into someone younger? Because like I notice so many people are so pessimistic in terms of the things that they think that they can do. They have no level of good belief. And it's tough to convince them of any of it.
It's a great point, and I don't have an answer yet. What I try to do, and I understand the question. Like I said, I just don't have a good answer.
That's okay.
But what I try to do is I try to be live by an example. I try to be I try to be consistent. Right, to be the consistent thing in their life. And I don't lie to them. You know, I think what I'm trying to do is work around the edges, because I don't know if there's a way to do what you're saying. At least I haven't thought of it. But I think that working around the edges, being consistent and being present and all these things will allow them to trust you. So I think that once they trust you, you can help guide that belief. But I don't think there's an A equals B here. I don't think there's a direct path to that. I think it's just I think it's those things. It's all those other things. Develop trust. And then you help guide them. You know, I was telling my guys this the other day. Some of the most, I've been coaching for 33 years. Okay. Got my first job in 1994. So give or take the 31 years. The most rewarding things that happen to me to this day is I'll get a call or a message, you know, from an athlete that I coached 25 years ago. And it's, you know, coach, because I preach the same things, you know, those lessons that you taught us, you know, about being on time and things like that. I thought you were crazy, but, you know, now as a father, you know, it's made me a better father. It's made me a better husband. It's made me a better boss. It's made me, you know, that's when I know that I'm doing something good. So to your point, I think that the rewards of that, are you doing the right thing? Are you helping in that way? You don't know until much later. And you have to trust the process right now, because down the road, it's going to work. Not for everybody. But, you know, when the student is ready, the lesson, they'll learn the lesson. I butchered that, whatever that fucking
The master will come?
The master will come or whatever. And when the master comes, you got to be ready for it. And then when you're ready for it, you take the lessons. Now, the lessons might not work right then and there, but if you're paying attention to the lessons, they're going to work.
Yeah.
They're going to work. So I think it's a long-term project.
Mm-hmm.
I think you got to ask a lot of questions. You know, you got to say, you know, are you receptive at getting better at this? You know, and then hopefully they'll say yes. And you kind of go back and forth, but you might have to do some of that one-on-one. You're not going to be able to impact everybody. So maybe that conversation out of the 40 kids that are in the room, it's saved for the 2 or 3 that you saw sweating in the gym, you know, working their ass off already. They already have some sort of level of buy-in. And maybe you can tell them, you could say, hey, here's what I think could be really awesome. If you guys do this, I think a lot of the team will follow. Not everybody, but I think some of the more talented guys will follow and so on, because you hear that, you know, in building cultures with a lot of professional teams. And they'll say, oh, they brought in this like journeyman quarterback, mainly just because he works his ass off. He's fun. He's like a locker room guy. But it's someone that kind of drives everybody else that maybe had a career previously. And so I think if you can communicate with the athlete and say, and still you're not going to always get that same buy-in from them, even after having conversation. But if you talk to them and you do have this conversation, you can always go back to that conversation and say, hey, I know doing these 400s right now, it's breaking you down, but remember the conversation we had, you said you wanted to be the best. And if you want to be the best, then this is
Takes what it takes.
Yeah. Are you in agreement that what we're doing, you know, and then they might be in disagreement on the program, or they might be in disagreement, but maybe there's some flexibility there to have more conversation. But to find that person is a diamond in the rough. It's not easy to find.
No.
Sometimes it's even just like luck. Like I got very lucky that Stan Efferding came to Super Training Gym. You know, I've coached so many different athletes, but it was hard to really get an all-time world record holder. You know, you can't make something out of nothing. You know, if somebody doesn't have quite a bit to work with in the beginning, it doesn't matter what kind of coach you are.
Obviously, you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit.
You just can't. You can't. Someone that weighs 300 pounds, that squats 300, it's going to be very hard to turn them into an all-time world record holder.
Not impossible, guys.
Not impossible.
Not impossible.
Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It's the journey, right? Like go on a journey.
And it also doesn't mean you can't. It also means it doesn't mean you can't get them to squat 600 or 700.
Right.
But the likelihood to get them, it just might take a really long ass time too. Which some people aren't afraid to take their time with stuff.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's missing, you know, in with a lot of people. I had I did a podcast, Finding Mastery, Michael Gervais, and we talk about. He asked me like, what's mastery, and different things. But one of the things it takes is time. You know, the willingness. I mean, you know this 9 years. You know, for which in the scheme of things isn't a tremendous amount of time, but 9 years to achieve a black belt in something that you work at, I'm sure, every day. 9 years is if you just look at what 9 years is, it's a long fucking time. Who's willing to dedicate themselves time every day for 9 years, or to be great at something?
It's a large percentage of your youthful years. You know what I mean? Maybe it's only 10% of your life if you live to be 100, but it's a larger percentage of like between, you know, the ages of 20 and 50.
Right. And I would argue, and one of the things is, you know, you spend this time and I said that, mastery are the things that are in between the lines, right? So you can have a sheet of music and you could play the notes, but you're not going to be Jimi Hendrix, right? So the information in between the notes reveals itself from spending the time, paying attention, immersing yourself in that quest. But the big thing, I think the reason why people stop is because they don't want to spend the time. They don't understand that it's not just this short attention, 30-second clip. You know, it's a different mindset. And it's that that time is the big thing. If you spend enough time and pay attention to something long enough, it's going to change you. I mean, you've had an incredible evolution, you know, from where you started.
Yeah, you've known me from over 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, we met at Gold's in Venice. And, you know, we're both very different people. We've, you know, taken similar paths. We're in the similar pool. But we didn't get here by mistake. And it wasn't haphazard, right? We both paid attention to something and kept our attention on it for a long time. And we learned along the way. And I think that that's a dying skill set. And it's unfortunate because patience is definitely a virtue. And I don't know if it's hard. Like with these kids, I always look at my kids now and I say, man, I would never want to be a kid now. It's so hard. We had our struggles, but it's not the same. Like at least we had a opportunity to hide.
Oh yeah.
Right? You know, like to not be.
Yeah, you would hear, I mean, when I was a kid, you would hear about someone in another town, but you didn't have to like see it.
No.
You know,
didn't know what they were
now
doing.
you go on social media and you see all these like lifts and all these cool things that other kids are doing, and you're maybe in the same sport and you're just probably not feeling so great about yourself sometimes.
You're comparing, you know, the comparison, it's just your whole life is on display. You know, like to me, that would have killed me. You know, because I was an only child, and you know, I spent a lot of time by myself, and I couldn't imagine sharing that time with somebody else. You know, that I don't want to know what's going on during that time.
I'm curious, man. This conversation's going all over the place, but from what you just said right there, we were just talking with Nick Best about this. Because you are right. I think it is harder, especially a kid who's like into physical culture these days.
Yeah.
Because you go online, you see all these jack people. I mean, that's why you got these youngins just wanting to hop on some shit when they're 18,
15,
19.
16 years old.
Because they
running
see
trend.
They see their idols doing it. Like, you know, they see the guy like Alex Eubank is one of the hot ones right now, right? He just got on TRT because he wants to be bigger, and he's like 22, early 20s.
Crazy to me.
But the other side of it is this. You also got the crazy young ones that are deadlifting 800 and 900 because they see people doing it. So they're like, oh, you can deadlift 900 pounds? And then you got a fucking 19-year-old deadlifting 900 pounds because he sees it's possible. So it's like
look, there's always a dark side to everything. Right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it doesn't mean I'm not making a judgment good or bad. I'm just saying it's difficult.
It is difficult.
Right?
It's much more difficult.
So there's a lot of benefits to it, to your point. Like, I didn't know that's possible. Well, I'm going to do it's like the 4-minute mile thing, right? But there's the dark side to that. You know, I'm doing all this shit. I don't look like that. The value system is a little weird. And now you're depressed, right? To your point, like guy in another town doing something, you don't know what he's doing. But now you know everything. And you're like, well, I want to be that guy. And then you start making bad decisions.
I want muscle and I need it now.
So, but again, it's the young mind is fragile, right? And it doesn't always make the right decision. Sometimes it does. And you get a kid, you know, deadlift 900 pounds. And then you get a kid who hangs himself, you know? So it's you know, it's like anything else. You know, you can't judge it as good or bad all the time. It's just different.
Long-time competitive Olympic lifter. I believe you're part of Olympic lifting committee as well.
Yeah, I just got reelected to the board of directors, which I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
Why are you disappointed?
I was on it before.
What does this entail? What do we got to do?
Well, you help kind of guide the direction of the sport, which the reason I ran again is because I felt the direction was not the best direction. So instead of bitching and complaining,
Get involved.
I'm going to get involved again. So I do it because weightlifting saved my life.
How did it save your life?
Yeah. So I am 100% convinced that if I didn't have weightlifting in my early 20s, I'd be in jail or dead. It gave me a place to spend my energy. It gave me it gave me a profession, right? It gave me skill set to be able to coach. It provided me with lifelong relationships, and I owe a debt to weightlifting that I can repay in 2 lifetimes. So if I can give back and help steward, guide the sport, make it better when I'm gone, then I feel it's my obligation. That's the only reason I do it. Otherwise, it's a fucking pain in the ass, and it's going to cause me problems, and it's going to cause me relationships. But I don't give a shit. I don't give a fuck what people think about me. Unless if I shed blood or sweat with you, outside of that, I don't give a fuck what you think of me. So, I just think that it needs help. I need help from people like me. It's not an egotistical thing. It's just if I'm in a position to help, I'm going to help.
What does Olympic lifting do? Like, what's the sales pitch, for the young kid
listening? We need to hire you as the CEO is what we need to do. There is none. Like, that's the one thing that we suck.
What's it good for, though? Like, what? Like, for an athlete, like, what's Olympic lifting good for?
Well, as far as a training modality? Yeah. So, like, I think, we have an explosive bucket in training, right? There's strength bucket, there's a explosive bucket, there's these few different buckets. I believe that the power cleaner, some of the variations of the weightlifting movements are the best way to teach and enhance explosiveness. Is it the only way? No. Like, we have you had Fred Duncan on, right? So, it's funny. Like, if you pull back 5,000 feet, we're saying the same exact thing, right? We have I don't appreciate the way he talks about weightlifting, but I'm biased. 100% biased.
He probably feels it's easier to teach people in track because that's what he's more proficient
absolutely.
at, right?
But I said at the end of the day, he's a good coach because we're using the same buckets. Now, I think that with young athletes, young developing athletes, so middle school, high school, and college, I think the weightlifting movements are great for a number of reasons, not just for the explosiveness, but it's to teach. I think that the way it trains the torso, it teaches them how to absorb an opposing force. It works on the nervous system that's specific to repeated explosion. There's a lot of different things other than you can get explosiveness by jumping. Absolutely.
Great mobility, and then also
all of it,
the
right.
mobility, and then also mobility through what seems like very compromising positions.
Yes.
Like the bottom of a snatch seems wild.
Absolutely.
It's
so
crazy.
You can look at the fitness qualities that the Olympic lifts develop individually and say, we can use this exercise for this fitness quality, this exercise for this fitness quality, and so forth and so on. To me, as if I have 45 minutes with somebody, I need something that's going to hit all the fitness qualities. So to me, weightlifting checks a lot of those boxes. It does a lot of fitness qualities. I don't have to do individual things. Now, for a professional, like when I was working with professional athletes, very rarely would I do Olympic lifts with them if they didn't have a history with it or if they're banged up. Right? Like they're there for a reason. Like Olympic lifting isn't going to make the difference if they don't already have it. I worked with Audra Gracie.
Nice.
For one of his fights. He knew Olympic lifts. So I asked him when I sat down with him, like, what are the things that you know are comfortable with doing that you can do with a high output? And he said, yeah, I can do Olympic lifting. I'm like, great, we'll put it in. If he told me not a way, I wouldn't have forced it on him. So I think it's an incredible, and especially for young kids, the coordination that's involved, just so many benefits.
About how young?
It depends. It's more of a biological age or chronological age, because it comes down to attention span. Like if they can't sit still for 10 minutes, I'm not teaching them fucking weightlifting.
It's high skill.
It's just, because it's just, so if they can hold their attention for a half hour, 40 minutes, then I'll spend that much time during the week, teaching them something, teaching them power clean or something like that. If they don't have that attention span, then I won't. There's plenty of other stuff. Like if they can't do pull-ups and push-ups and dips and animal walks, I'm not worried about the barbell. You know, let's get them
a base.
Just that's the base. So like my first, like when I work with the middle school kids at the school, and I got a lot of pushback from the parents. Because they would come in before I took over the program, and they're benching and squatting and doing clean, all terrible. And I'm thinking to myself, these kids can't even do a fucking pull-up. Like, what the hell, who cares? So I took over the program, and we're in the gym, we're doing bear crawls, and we're doing pull, and the parents are like, well, they're not lifting weights. And the head coach thankfully had my back. He's like, look, I got your back, you do what you do. So we're gonna lose a bunch of kids, but eventually they'll come back around. So, you know, people have a bad, you're an Olympic lifting guy and you're going to throw, I don't throw it down everybody's throat. There's an appropriate time for everything. But I really think it's an important part of the developmental process for young kids. That's my take. And Fred will disagree, but
what do you think of, I think it was Max Aieda's coach who said, lift it perfectly or lift it whatever way you can.
Yeah, I was Abajev. So, got to understand, Ivan Abajev was the national head coach of the Bulgarian weightlifting team. You know, so he wasn't a guy that was developing technique. He was just managing the training. It depends, right? Like you look at people lifting world records and they're doing it all kind of crazy ways. But so here's a story about Abajev. So my coach was there for this. So it was, I think, the World Championships, probably in the 80s, somewhere in the 80s. My coach was the coach for the women's team. And one of Abajev's lifters went out, lifted, broke the world record, comes back, and he wasn't technically, like you wouldn't look at him and say, oh man, I'm going to emulate that technique. It was rough. So he comes in the back room. One of the coaches for the other countries comes up to Abajev and says, hey, do you think that if his technique was better, he would lift more weight? And Abajev looked at him, he says, well, he just set the world record. His technique is fine. Well, that's what I'm saying. But like, I wouldn't teach that to a young kid.
Right.
But if you're doing it at that level, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right? I guess it's just the way it is. So like people I was one of those guys. Like I was a movement Nazi. It has to be perfect. I'm like, as I've gotten older, I'm like, well, does it have to be perfect? Like, what's the gray area? And especially when I work with these kids, like those kids are not going to lift like my weightlifters. But the amount of time that I spend perfecting the movement with my weightlifters, they'll never achieve that kind. So then if that's the case, if it's not going to be perfect, what's the acceptable range?
And you're really just trying to get a particular stimulus.
Right.
Like have them do the lift proficiently enough to where they're getting some of the, I don't know, you would call it plyometric effect.
Whatever the benefits are,
yeah.
is it safe? And are you developing the fitness qualities that you want to develop? That's your range. And if it falls within that range, then it's good. Might not be perfect, but it's good enough.
I remember talking with Max and he said, I asked him about squat every day. I was like, there's a lot of people squatting every day. This is years ago when we had him on the podcast. I'm like, what do you think of this? He's like, what do you want to know about it? I've been doing it for 12 years.
Right.
I was like, that's disgusting.
John Brose is another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's just like, I would never do that.
That sounds insane.
I mean, I did that for I did that for many years.
To some capacity, because there's some sort of squat involved in most of the Olympic.
Well, I'm talking about, squatting, not only just snatching, but I'm talking about squatting. And
what's that like? Squatting every day. And then like, are you
miserable?
Talking about like, sometimes you just do like 2 plates, or you're probably talking about a real workout.
Oh yeah. No, I didn't squat like you, but I had a 300 kilo squat.
661.
Yeah. So, and a lot of 80% of that is a lot of fucking weight.
Yeah.
A lot of weight. And then you got to snatch a clean and jerk. So it's not like you're just squatting. So it's a crucible of pain and suffering.
I love the words you're using, man.
It's just, but I wouldn't trade it for, it's the best. I look back on those days and I'm like, man, what a great time. Like, what was so lucky to have that experience of of that suffering. Right?
Tuna sandwich on the dresser. I can't stop thinking about it.
Hey, it works, man.
I'm going to try it tonight.
It was all great except for the night sweats.
Old Smelly's coming back.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you gotta get, next time I see you, be 300 pounds.
Like the sandwiches.
I'm really curious about this, man. As someone who doesn't watch a crazy amount of Olympic weightlifting, when I do watch it, I do notice that the Chinese lifters just seem to move differently.
If you look at, so there's a couple of things going on. You know, unlike the Russians back in the day. So the Russian, if you look at the continent, it's such a genetically diverse continent, right? Because you could have people from all different genetic pools in Russia. But if you look at the Russia, like I believe in the, I teach a Russian kind of style technique.
Gotcha.
And if the top level Russians will all kind of lift similarly, timing, rhythm, even if there were different heights and things like that. If you look at the Chinese, they're very homogeneous. So as far as their anthropometrics, and there's not a lot of diversity in the gene pool.
And even the way that Lou does his clean and snatch is like different than what most people do, right?
Well, he jerks with that squat jerk, which isn't what I would ever teach.
Yeah.
But it certainly, it's worked for him most of the time. He hasn't, his percentage of makes in the jerk are a lot less than some of his other teammates because it's just it's a less reliable style.
So because of a lot of the Chinese lifters being a little bit similar in terms of the ratio between their the length of their spine and their femur and so on, they could be taught very similarly.
Yes.
So they can all lift a very similar
100%.
fashion.
That's correct.
That makes managing stuff so much easier, right?
Yes.
As opposed to, if you're coaching like a basketball player,
Right.
you said you worked with Lamar Odom.
Right.
The discrepancy of having him do like a box squat or something is going to be way different than
100%.
someone that's 6'1" or 2.
100%.
I got you.
And the other thing too is, by the time they get to this level, again, it's the same kind of system that the Russians did. They start the, small town and kind of go on the way. They are just the super freaks of super freaks. They have great coaching. As far as the way the coaches are taught,
And they select them to
they're selecting them, and they're 3-4 deep in each weight class, right? So if you can't do it, they'll just bring next man up. So
they have a conveyor belt of
it is just
talent.
remarkable. It's funny. One of my friends has a company here, but he works with Chinese Olympic Chinese Olympic Federation.
How low he's getting.
Up until recently. Those guys didn't do any recovery methods outside of traditional Chinese medicine.
Wait, who? The Chinese lifters?
Yes. Or the Chinese athletes.
The Chinese athletes.
The weightlifters too.
Put two and two together.
My friend was the first person to introduce a foam roller to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, or if there wasn't like acupuncture or cupping or things like that, they didn't have anything. They do
have some physical massage.
Yes, physical massage.
Yeah.
But like all these other
tools.
They didn't have. Here's a crazy story. So I think it's the Beijing. I don't know if it's Beijing Training Center. Anyway, wherever the weightlifting is. So weightlifting is here, right across the hall. Like here's the hallway. It was gymnastics. So gymnastics wanted to learn how to lift weights because they didn't lift any weights. So they wouldn't go across the hallway to the weightlifting. They called my buddy in America and they paid him a shit ton of money to come out to China and teach them how to lift weights. Like their culture is weird.
Wow.
So like, I don't know what's going on over there, but this is many years ago. So I don't know if things have changed.
Yeah.
But they're different. They're different.
Is being bow-legged an advantage? I've seen a lot of lifters.
Kolkov is bow-legged.
Very much so, yeah.
I don't have the facts off the top of my head, but I remember reading some research many years ago that talked about the benefit of being bow-legged. So I don't think you can select for it, because I can't imagine there's a high percentage of the population.
Right.
But there was something there was a benefit. What I think it is it allows you to keep the bar closer to the body, because when you're in a squat and you're bow-legged, there's less of an inclination of the shin. So it allows you to keep the bar closer to your center of gravity. Because when you squat, especially in the snatch, because your hip is lower, your shin's going to be further forward, bar's further away from your center of gravity. So if you're bow-legged,
keep it close.
It keeps it closer. So
what about some of this conjecture against weightlifting about the feet pointing out?
Well, so that's
sometimes you've heard the GOATA guys and stuff like that we've had on the show.
I mean, I don't. I'll reserve my. It's a family show. It's a family show. There's no basis in reality to any of that. There are different factors that go into the angle of the foot. One of which is the shape and size of your femoral head and how it articulates into the acetabulum, into the hip. Right? Some people's, the way it's shaped doesn't allow for a straight ahead foot and still be able to get good range and good activation.
They'll have to pop the weight up and then shift their foot out a little bit.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't make, so in weightlifting, that's never a discussion in the sport of weightlifting.
You leave the platform, and as you leave, because you might start the lift with your feet straight-ish, I'd imagine.
Yeah, in the clean, your feet are straighter because the hip, the starting position of the hip is higher. In the snatch, because you want to get the shins out of the way, right? Starting with the feet out somewhat allows the shin to go out instead of forward. But moreover, in the reception of the bar, a slight outward inclination of the foot opens up the hip a little bit. It
and
allows
helps
for a
the
deeper
spine
position.
to be able to round if it needs to.
So there's some. Now, does that mean that some people can't have their foot straight ahead all the time? Of course not. Of course, but it just because the absence of straight feet doesn't say that there's something wrong. Now, if somebody is overly rotated
and the knees caving in,
that's a problem. We see that at the high school level. That's a problem. So you fix it. But to me, you fix it by actually squatting with your feet straighter. Even if it's if somebody is overly rotated, I'll have them have shoes and grab onto the rack, or I tell them to go home, grab onto a chair. Keep your. I do this as a stretch. I'll set up my feet perfectly straight. I'll grab onto the squat rack and I'll just squat and I'll stay down there and I'll move and I'll readjust my feet, make sure because my toes want to turn out a little bit. And when you pin the feet, and as long as there's no knee pain, right, the thing that has to move is the hip. So couple that with some internal rotation activation, like 90-90s, things like that to get the hip. But yeah, it's a problem if it's a problem. If it's not a problem, it ain't a problem, right? Let's not make problems where they don't exist. So people that say this is we talked about this earlier. Like anybody who says always and never, I got a problem with in most cases, right? You should never, do some things, but in training world, there's not a lot of that. So when you hear you should always keep your feet straight, you should never turn because it's wrong. We can have a disagreement about that.
It's a red flag, man.
It's a red flag for me. It's a red flag
for me too.
Because there's more. It's not. Like I said, there's more to it than that. So yeah, I don't buy that. I think it's a bunch of bullshit. That's as civil as I've ever been on that topic ever.
Damn, I love it. After you said bullshit, I'm like, is there more?
Yeah. You must have been.
No, don't. No.
It sounds like you've been through a transformation.
100%.
Tell us about your book.
Speaking of transformations, Suffer Smarter. A lot of the themes that we talked about, as far as transformation and.
If you can get on mic too. Get on the microphone.
Oh yeah, stay on mic.
There you go.
Yeah, so for me, this journey started about 7 years ago. I felt Man, I felt bad. I was going 100 miles an hour on my business, trying to get the business going, or maintaining the business, growing the business, to the point where, 16, 20 hours a day. You wound up in the hospital twice. 2014.
Like panic attack type thing?
Just, I was just working, wasn't sleeping. I wasn't doing anything. And I went to bed and coughed up blood. I went to the hospital. It's funny, like the first time and the second time was the same actually the same doctor, same emergency room. It happened in 14. I think it happened in 17. I went there, and the guy was a CrossFitter, a local CrossFitter. So he knew me because I did a lot of work in the CrossFit community in LA. And he had just I had just done a seminar. I had all the Russians at my gym, Klokov and Ilya and all these guys to do a seminar. And I was so sick during that time. I don't even remember. The only my memories is of some of the videos that I have. So after it was all said and done that night, I was still sleeping. It's crazy. So I had a house across the street from my gym that stayed vacant for years. Like I slept in my gym because I just wanted to be uncomfortable. Like I didn't want any comforts. I wanted to be so uncomfortable that I just kept focusing on the mission. And there's a cost to that. I didn't have a kitchen. Like, for a while, I didn't have a shower. Like I was just, and hot water. Like I was just really, I wanted to put myself in this Spartan situation so keep me sharp. I thought it would keep me sharp. I didn't have the discipline to take a breath. So anyway, 2014, after that event, I went to sleep and I started coughing up blood. I said, well, this isn't good. And I rushed myself I drove to the hospital, and the doctor knew me, and he had attended that seminar. And he says, look, there's nothing in your blood work there's nothing that's wrong with you. Like you don't have a disease. He says, when was the last time you actually had a couple of good nights sleep in a row? And I said, I don't remember. He says, okay, I want you to take your dog out, because he knows I love my dog. He said, find a hotel and just stay there for a couple of days. Don't, leave your phone, don't do anything. So I booked a room at the Four Seasons in Pasadena. And lo and behold, 2 days later, I felt great. And so, I wasn't physically suffering. Like I wasn't training. I was still squatting 500 pounds, but that's not suffering to me. That's easy. I can do that any day. It's not hard for me mentally. And I was in pain. I couldn't walk upstairs without pain or being out of breath. I was fat, really fat, 30. So I don't know what my highest was, but I was about 37% body fat because I had a DEXA scan done.
Wow.
So I was fat. I was just not happy. And right before the pandemic, I knew I needed to do something different. So I set up the Prowler. I had a big gym with 3 big bay doors, and I set up a Prowler, and I set it right by one of the bay doors. And I said, okay, tomorrow I'm going to push this thing. At the time I had messed with jujitsu, and I had stopped jujitsu because I was getting hurt. And it was the first introduction to the change my path. When I would get mounted and be out of breath, like when I lost my breath, I started to panic. And then, I had a moment when it happened, I had a moment of clarity and said, yeah, that's what I need. So I didn't know, that feeling of fight, flight, fear, all these things. And I used to get it through training, like I used to train, but it was missing from my life. So I stopped doing jujitsu and set up that Prowler. And for months and months and months, it stayed there without moving. Pandemic hit, and I finally had some time. like to just, because everything stopped in California, right? So I was it was like a Wednesday, 11 o'clock, sun's out, and I'm sitting on my porch, and I finally I don't remember the last time that ever happened, and I had some moment of clarity, and I had time to think about, like, what the fuck am I doing, to myself. So I called up my buddy Adam, who was a chef, had a restaurant in Hollywood and Vine. His restaurant was closed too. And we both were kind of in a similar situation, working ourselves to death, not really paying attention to the important things. And I said, Adam, meet me 6 a.m. We're going to push this fucking prowler. And 6 a.m. came, walked in, threw my keys on the jerk boxes, and opened the door. I'm going to get fucking emotional. Let me say. And started pushing the prowler, and did the first, I don't know how long it was, whatever. And I started to cry, like I'm doing now, because I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is how I need to feel. Like, this is what's missing. This is it. I knew, like, as soon hit me like a fucking bolt of lightning. And I started to realize, like, I'm lost the suffering, the physical suffering from my life. I used to get it from training. When I retired at 31, I didn't know anything but training for sport, right? And it was such a high intensity that it checked that suffering box for me. But when it was done for the next 16, 17, 18 years, I didn't have it in my life anymore. And I was a worse human for it. I was a worse person for it. I was just not who I wanted to be. And I just couldn't figure it out until that moment. I probably went 20 feet before it was like, yes, yes. So from that moment on, I realized that I needed to make changes. I was writing a book at the time, but it was a training book. It was like a weightlifting book or something like that. And I said, no. I said, this is going to be the thing that's going to change my life. And I know I'm not alone. I know there's guys like me that are fucking struggling. They don't know, like they feel bad. They don't know why. Maybe they're ex-athletes like we were, and they lost it. Or maybe they've never done anything in their life. So that's what I want to write about. So, Suffer Smarter is about how do you introduce productive discomfort back into your life? And how does it change you? How do you do it? It's not a training book. There's very little training in there. There's like a little bit at the end, just a basic, like, how I train. But it's about the why you need to do it. How do you start? Like I talked earlier about, put your shoes on. Mm-hmm. Right? If you're not doing, like, for me, it started with making my fucking bed and brushing my teeth. Like, I wasn't doing those things because I get up and my brain was like, I got to do this. But I wasn't mindful enough to just take care of myself. Balance is bullshit. Like, nobody has balance 50-50. Yeah. When we're busy, maybe it's 90-10. Like, if you have 3% of time to spend with your kids, that 3% is, you got to be all in, focused on that task. Fitness is the same thing. I don't have 50% of my time to train. If I have 10% of my time, it's got to be mindful. I got to be all in. I got to be present. How do you create that? How do you prioritize it? How do you get it back? How do you, for me, like I said, it was just the uncomfortable, spending a part of your day outside of the big things that you always do. Make my bed, brush my teeth, make my bed, brush my teeth, put on my shoes, standing in my hallway with my fucking shoes on. And I'm like, it's not that I don't want to describe it as fear, but it's like, I had to force myself to go outside and just move. So how do you, and this is a pie in the sky. I believe, especially with men, I can't speak for women because I'm not a woman. But for men, a man that is strong, that goes on that pursuit of strength, whatever that looks like, is a man that's going to be happier, healthier, more productive in society. I've been on both ends. I've been a strong man physically and done all the things to be strong. I've been a weak man, being immersed in just work and not at all in touch with my physicality. And I've once again been a strong man. And I can tell you unequivocally that being mindful about being strong and fit will change your whole life and the people around you. And I think this book helps get people there.
Do you think there was in that moment where you got really upset after pushing the prowler, do you think there was a moment where you were just thinking like, I've really neglected, I'm trying to do all these other things. I'm trying to be great, trying to run this business, but I sort of neglected myself.
Yeah. It's just, I got, first it was anger. Like, what the fuck did I let this happen? Like, I would never accept this from my athletes. How the fuck did I let this happen to myself? And then I started to, that was also an evolution for me about being kind to myself. Like, I was so hard on myself and rigid. If I couldn't do these things, then I'm not going to fucking do it. Right? If I can't, I'm supposed to squat today. I used to write down all my training plan. I'm supposed to squat today. I'm supposed to squat 500 pounds for a double. And I get in there. I'm like, there's no fucking way I'm squatting 500 pounds for a double. I can't even get out of fucking bed today. So what do? Nothing. Now I give myself some grace. Right? It's how to find, you have to judge yourself on different metrics. Like for me, I'm on the 50-year cycle. Right? So if you're on a 50-year cycle, what you do in any given day is not that important, as long as you do something. Right? So sometimes it's walking. That's it. Sometimes it's something harder. I have a path. But that path is wide. Right? But as long as you still stay on that path and you're heading in the right direction, you're going to be okay. As an athlete, it's a little bit of a different, it's some more different factors involved. But we're not athletes. You're an athlete. I'm not an athlete. And for me, I measure my blood work. That's my metric. Is my visceral fat. Do I have visceral fat or do I not have visceral fat? Right? Is my body fat a certain percentage or is it not? How is my other things? That's what I train for.
This is a great marker for a lot of people.
It has to be.
Yeah.
For health and fitness, it's not about how much, right? It's about what's going on inside.
And once you have some of these things wrapped up and you go through, something like Merrick Health and you get your blood checked
Right.
and you go over with a doctor the things that you can change and make better. And after you get some of these things better, maybe that's when you start to think about, oh, it's been a long time since I really practiced, jumping and, maybe at that time you're just jumping rope, but
Right.
it starts to give you an idea to like push a little further and a little harder and so on.
It allows you to.
And now you have multiple metrics.
Well, so this is the thing. Like, if you feel better, you'll be more willing to move. Now we know the benefits of movement, especially with kids, right? Like, when kids move, cognitively, they're better. We stick them in a fucking classroom for 8 hours a day, which is crazy to me. But movement, there's this huge downstream and broad downstream effect from moving. It's not just physical. Feeling more capable as a man, I believe, makes you make better decisions. Like, and this is, I hesitate to say this, but there's truth in this. Like, you look at these kids that are doing mass shootings. How many jacked fucking kids? Now, it's definitely not a correlation. Of course, I'm just saying, like, those kids, they're not physically minded, right? a lot, and not that I'm saying that kids who are trained or in good shape don't have problems. I'm just saying that they have different problems. I'm saying if you're not moving, move. Doesn't matter what you do. This is, we talked about this before. It's like before I was like, well, if you're not doing this, this, and this, it's bullshit. In fitness, in movement, moving is better than not moving. We talked about like the, David Wechter, like the rope flow. I think he's a little bit of a kook, but I get, like when we had this conversation, you showed me and you kind of described it to me and the benefit, and I'm like, okay, I get it. Now, am I going to have my weightlifters do it? Probably, maybe not. But, I'm going out there moving around. I'm moving. The fuck do I care what it is? Right? It's something different. And I tell people, like in a book, I look at the world through the lens of a barbell. That's what I'm most comfortable with. But I do more non-barbell stuff in my training than I do barbell stuff. And I would tell people, if pickleball is your jam, if that's what blows your hair back, fucking play pickleball. What the hell do I care? But it's better than sitting on the couch watching porn. Just do something. So I think, if I can, the goal of Suffer Smarter first was to write down my thoughts on this process. And then it's like, okay, this can help. This can help. If I'm paying fucking $400 a month for health insurance because there's so many people have metabolic disease, and I got to pay for it. I don't have metabolic disease. I'm making good choices. I want to pay $200 a month for insurance. So if I get more people healthy, maybe I'll spend $200 a month instead of fucking $400 a month. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
I think it'd be good to talk a little bit about Kobe Bryant here for a minute, because I think that was a pretty cool time when you and I first met at Gold's Gym. We'd see Kobe come in and train sometimes, and there's a lot of celebrities that came through there. But when he was in there, he was training with a friend of ours, and he was doing, some box squats and lifting with chains and doing some reverse hyper. Like, he was in there training pretty hard. Yeah.
So one of my good friends, Joe Carbone, one of the best strength coaches that I've ever seen. He was Kobe's strength coach from the time he was in high school. So he knew his dad. And so when they were in, so Joe was the head strength coach for the 76ers at the time. And Joe would bring Kobe down, and Kobe would practice with the 76ers in high school.
He's crazy. Like 16, 17
years
old.
It's just nuts. And then they developed a relationship, and then Joe trained him, when he was 15, 16 years old. And when Kobe got drafted by the Lakers, he brought Joe and Chrissy, his wife, out to LA, and he was working with Kobe still. And then Joe became the head strength coach of the Lakers.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was working with the entire Laker team. But the interesting thing about Kobe is that during the 98, we've talked about this before, during the 98 lockout, they had no place to train. At the time, I was a strength coach at College of the Canyons in Santa Clarita, California. And Joe and I were teammates. Joe was a weightlifter. So we arranged it to where Kobe would do his training during the lockout at College of the Canyons. So he did all his lifting and his basketball stuff. So I got a chance to, for the whole lockout, watch him do his thing. And it looked like good basic strength and conditioning, power cleans, squats, deadlifts, bench press, RDLs, like just nothing fancy. And Kobe had said that, and during that time he transformed. Like, that was the year before. When he made all those air balls, he was kind of a skinny kind of a kid. And then after
I think it was his rookie season. He's like fucking 18 years old.
Yeah, he was definitely young.
Yeah.
But during that time of dedicated training, he just came to the next season. He was a man. And he credits that time of just being able to train. And he's a gift to me. He's world class in everything. So his physiology is world class too. So he just put on muscle like a beef cattle, and working on he would be upstairs working on his game. I got the chance to watch that. He would run through my entire basketball team. But to see him do his thing was really incredible. And Joe did such a great job managing his training. And Kobe was bought in.
Let's go.
Bought in. Like you didn't have to say anything twice to him. You know, he was like a missile. You point him in a fucking direction, he's going to blow it up. It was amazing to watch. And I think like if everybody that talented had that drive outside of their sport, you know, we would be talking about other people in the same light we talk about Kobe Bryant. Because, you know, he's at that level, everybody's talented. I mean, no one gets there because they're not talented. Like what separates a guy like Kobe Bryant and then, you know, like Michael Jordan, although Michael didn't train all that much, he did something, is this other stuff. And Kobe had the other stuff, man. Holy shit. I've never seen anything like it before. But yeah, it was a pleasure to watch him develop. Taught me a lot about what's possible.
Where can people find out more information about you? Where can people find the book?
So the book is going to be released November 29th. SeanWaxman.com. I put all this together myself, folks. So, I mean, it's almost like a gorilla trying to, what do they say, a monkey fucking a football? That's me in a computer. I didn't want to hire anybody to do it. I wanted to do it myself because I'm crazy like that. So,
so good. A monkey fucking a football.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's SeanWaxman.com. You can
Man, that looks good. What are you talking about?
well, because you don't understand what it took. And you can read the first chapter for free.
Nice.
I said it's going to be available on Amazon November 29th. And I think, you know, it's if you're struggling, the book will help. If you know somebody that's struggling, get it for them. I'm going to have at some point, I'm going to have a forum to talk about, especially really targeted towards men. Not that women are excluded, they're not excluded, but I think about training. So I'm going to share my training. Not that it's anything fancy, but it's just a kind of an accountability thing. So at some point we're gonna go in that direction. But in the meantime, yeah, SeanWaxman.com. I'm on Instagram. The fuck is my Instagram handle? _Sean SEAN_Waxman.
Yep.
And I don't. It's just a bit. I don't do anything really personal on there. It's just I put stuff on my weightlifters, on my high school guys, and on my own training. I got some videos, and it's all related towards this. It's not vanity, although we all have ego, but it's more for hopefully send out a message, get people fired up about moving.
Everybody, make sure you at least give it a try. Try a sandwich next to your bed. Don't knock it until you try it.
Don't knock it, man.
I mean, give it a shot.
Use sourdough. It'll be better for you.
That's the key. Strength is never weakness. Weakness never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.